In our next chapter, we move on to one called Understanding the KBA. Now, we've already done a substantial dive into the key bidding array, but here's where we're going to slow down and dissect it so that we completely understand what it is and how to build one. It's very easy. It'll be the most common thing that you're going to use when you're creating bidding lists. In fact, unless you're pinning, 3 or 4 locks, that you can do in your head, you're probably going to want to whip up really fast with pen and paper a KBA or whatever tool you use. So we'll start by reading the chapter and we'll segue as it becomes necessary. What is the KBA? KBA stands for Key Bidding Array, and this is the foundational tool for deriving change key biddings. Let's build a KBA. Our KBA will be based on total position progression and expressed in a 2-step 10-depth system. Again, we're working with Schlage. So our KBA will be based on total position progression. Okay, the KBA that you build is based on the method of progression. We're in total position progression. We're going to talk about what that means later on. But for right now, I'm just declaring this KBA is for total position progression, again for Schlage. And we're going to use our same master key, 470529, that we have been working on all along. So let's switch to the screen view and let's take a closer look. We'll go through these steps and build a key bidding array. Okay, so the first step, we're going to write down our TMK. Then we're going to take that TMK and we're going to convert it into a table. There's 6 columns and there's 6 rows. It's obvious why there are 6 columns. 6 rows are less obvious, and we say that here. Why 6 columns? That's obvious. We have a 6-pin lock. Why 6 rows? That's less obvious, but we will use them as we go along. Now, let's add progression possibilities. The accepted rule, the accepted standard is that you're going to use all of the other cuts that are in this manufacturer's system at least 2 away and maintain parity. What that means is if you have an odd number here, you'll use all odd numbers here. You don't have to do that. You could do limited progression limited position progression where you don't follow this. That's a different method of progression. But in total position progression, you're going to maintain parity, meaning whatever the number is in the TMK, odd or even, you're going to maintain that odd or even relationship. In Schlage, you have to be at least 2 away from each cut because there is no, as I've heard said in locksmithing classes, there is no number 1 master pin in the Schlage kit. You can look for it. It's not there. Schlage is every 30,000ths of an inch because it's a 2-step system, meaning you couldn't have a 1, a 2, and a 3, and a 4 here. Those keys would not play well to each other when they had to be master keyed into the same system. So in total position progression, you'll maintain parity, and you're going to use the other cuts that are left over in its depth system. So you've got a 10-depth system, which means if you have to go every other key, you'll have 5 left over. When you pull one of them out for the TMK, you'll be left over with 3. So follow your parity. You don't have to follow the parity, but you wouldn't be working in total position progression. So for total position progression, we're following our parity. And that's what progressing the first column looks like. You can guess what the other ones are going to be, and we're going to get to that, but let's just, flip to the next, chapter right now. 4, 6, 8, 0. 7, 9, 1, 3. 2, 4, 6, 8. 9, 1, 3, 5. 6802. So I'm going through these as if it was an odometer. You could do in this column, you could do any progression that you wanted. I just think of it as an odometer. So what's after 9, if your odometer is going in every 2 and your wheel in the odometer only has that parity in it, the next one to come up is 1. But here, the other cuts would be 4, 6, 8, and 0. You don't have to write 4, 6, 8, 0. You could write 0, 4, 6, 8. You could write 8, 6, 4, 0. You write it any way you want. It doesn't matter. This is just the way that I do it, and I think it's the way that you'll see other people do it as well. Because we are in a 2-step system, we are using all of the other possibilities other than 9 within our 10-depth system. Remember, we never use the TMK bidding in the progression possibilities in total position progression. The possible cuts are, of course, 0 through 9 in Schlag. We must always be exactly an increment of 2 away from the TMK bidding. Advanced locksmithing techniques will teach you how to safely break that rule, by the way. And the most economical way to progress the chambers is to use 1, 3, 5, 7. And I've amended that statement a little bit. Remember that we never use the TMK in the progression possibilities in TPP. And one final rule is that you maintain parity in your chambers. If your TMK cut is even, keep your progression possibilities even. If they are odd, keep your progression possibilities odd as well. Maintaining parity is simply agreed to as best practice in TPP. The possible cuts are, of course, 0 through 9. We must always be exactly an increment of 2 away from the TMK bidding. And again, advanced locksmithing techniques will teach you how to safely break this rule. The most economical way to progress this chamber is to use the other cuts that are at least 2 away from every other cut, and that leaves us with 1, 3, 5, and 7. As any other choices will result in less progression possibilities, or breaking the rule of being at least 2 away from every other progression possibility, and maintaining parity, and the TMK bidding for that chamber. The order in which, the order in which we list the progressives is not set in stone. I order the progressives as an odometer would progress that column, though I could absolutely order the 1, 3, 5, and 7 in any order I want. I could have listed them 7, 5, 3, 1. You will get the same change key biddings from this KBA if you were to do that, just in a different order. All the same biddings, if you wrote all 4,096 out, they're all going to be in that same system. Just, AA20 in this progression system is not going to be AA20 in this progression system. Great advanced reading on this subject is to be found in Billy B. Edwards Jr. CML book, Master Keying by the Numbers. First edition, page 183. That is a pretty heady book. I've read it cover to cover once, maybe twice, and I've referred to it countless times. Advanced topic. We do not need to use all 4 progression possibilities, nor must we be 2 away from every other cut, as I teased earlier. Most definitely. Having said this, we cannot be 1 cut away from the TMK bidding for another progression possibility, as there is no .015, which would be a 1 in Schlag, master in the kit. And also the threshold for interchange is agreed to as .023, as we said earlier. For purposes of this primer, we are assuming to use all progression possibilities in each chamber. Let's fill in all the other chambers' progression possibilities as seen here. So as you study this, if you were to pause this and just study it, you'll see I've done exactly that. It's nothing to get too excited over, except if you understand this and you can demonstrate proficiency in simply doing this, then it is something to get excited over because you've just created a keying system. Now that we've used up 5 of our 6 rows, if you study the above KBA, you will see a pattern where we are always 2 increments away from the TMK cut and the other progression possibilities. But this always follows a, the pattern called parity, as we had established. If the TMK number is odd, is an even number, keep your progression possibilities as an even number. 0 is considered an even number. Same if it's odd. In 2-step progression, this is the norm. Next, we will build our TMK into a table to allow us to add our sequence of progression known as the SOP. It's basically the order in which these odometer wheels spin. You can sort the spin sequence on your odometer any way you want. Our table will have a total of 6 columns as we are working in a 6-pin system, but also 6 rows. 1 row for the TMK, 4 rows for progression possibilities, and the 6th row is our SOP, and it will look like that. Okay, I've put the SOP this way just because it's the odometer method. You can sort that any way that you like, and we'll discuss, I'm sure, why you might want to sort it differently. Even though it takes more mental lifting, if you'll go with that phrase, just more exertion of the brain to sort out of odometer sequence. So there you go. Let's dissect this KBA so we know what is going on. But first, some facts. Every manufacturer has its own specific set of rules about step or increment. The above example can be used in a Schlage or an Arrow or a Yale system, though Corbin 70, Kwikset, and certainly systems like ASA would look different as a result of differing rules. But they all use the same KBA in terms of the construct of what a KBA is. It'll be a table. It'll be so many columns, which are based on how many chambers you're working at. It'll be so many rows. 1 row for the TMK, 1 row for the SOP. Once you understand the KBA, you can apply it to all systems and therefore derive biddings. The SOP can be in any order and could be better as ECA BDF. It could be. And the difference there is the A column, the A column or the A chamber rotates every single cut key. There's a new value there every time. So you might want to rotate the center of the key more often rather than less often. And I know I'm running the risk of saying this, which I know I'll say again later, but when you are rotating the E and the F, you've already gotten, by the time you rotate the F column 1 time, you'll have 1,024 changes already. By the time you rotate the E column, you'll have 256 changes already, which means if you've ever put a key in a cylinder, like I've mentioned this client in the past, just a boatload of Schlage F51 Georgian 605. And some of these keys and some of those cylinders and some of those pins, after so many years, they get worn. And he had an awful master key that I inherited. This gentleman came in one day and said, "Here's my master key. I want you to key me a 3-flat. Here's my master key." Which, after establishing that he was the owner of the master key, we did that. And you don't really have a lot of choice when you're selecting your TMK when the key is handed to you. But the point is the bidding of the TMK was awful in the sense that we didn't have a healthy relationship between cuts on the key. There was an extremely deep cut. It was at the max. I still remember his key to this day, his bidding. And because of other work that we had inherited from him, we were stuck with rotating that 6th, or well, in his case, the 5th column as A. his key got so worn, the cylinder, the pins, everything got so worn that you could jiggle the key, jiggle it in the sense of think of a rocking boat. The bow goes up, the bow goes down. The bow goes up, the bow goes down. The stern goes down, the stern goes up. The stern goes down. So where's the least rocking part of a boat? If you're on a cruise and you're seasick, go to the very center of the boat. Same with the key. You don't want to stack number 2 master keys when you've got a zinc cylinder plug and a very worn pin, worn broaching in the cylinder, and a worn key. You could possibly jiggle that to the point, not jiggle it, but force the key in a hyper bow up, stern down scenario where you might get that worn 2-pin to work. So if you're keeping the changing of every key to the center of the boat, you're putting together a better constructed cylinder pinning in terms of security. And that's what all that means. This will keep the last rotating chambers towards the end of the developed system, your E and your F. Why is this important? Keys get jiggled. The least jiggle occurs at the center of the key, just as the least amount of pitch or roll in a boat is at its center of gravity. And these and your ABC SOP chambers will have the first and most frequent different cuts. In fact, you will already have created 1,024 changes before you have to rotate an F in your SOP column. And if you have a 7-pin, you'll have a G column. You can also call them anything you want. These don't have to be letters. They can be Roman numerals. I would probably not use numbers down here. You can use any character down here that you wanted. Letters just seem logical. Roman numerals kind of seemed logical as well. I just think it's easier to look at letters, in my opinion. Your brain has to think for a moment what 4 is in Roman numeral, at least mine does, or what 6 is. 1, 2, and 3, and 5 are pretty easy to get real quick. If your system will only require, say, 200 changes, you can elect to use a larger, thicker master pin and not a 2-pin master in your E and F columns. This goes a long way to prevent key picking or jiggling a key to get the cylinder to turn. So what I mean by that is you can use a thicker master pin out here in your E and F columns because you're getting to 200 changes. You're never going to need to really rotate these columns. And for you to use a thicker master pin, you would have to abandon this total position progression concept over here and go with limited position progression, where your progression possibility in these 2 chambers, you could just put a 8 here and you could put a 3 here. Every key is going to be 8-3, which means you'll have a thicker master pin. You'll have a 4 master in both of these chambers, which is, well, for that matter, if you were never going to rotate those chambers, you could put a 9 here and a 3 here. That would give you a 9, 5, a 2. You could put a 2 here. That would be a max. That would be a very deep cut at your bow naturally. You'd probably want to avoid that. You might go with a 0 here and then maybe I'd probably go with maybe a 5, a 4 or a 5 here. And you wouldn't have the rest of these progression possibilities here, which means, of course, your system is only going to be 4 times 4 times 4 times 4 because you've now left total position progression. But that's what I'm driving at there. If your system will never get that big, don't use total position progression. And we're going to go deeply into that later. But think of it as, spoiler, this is what we're going to talk about in a future chapter. That's what I mean, a thicker master pin. We are using FEDCBA, as it's easy to understand for the first time how the columns will rotate. Just imagine an odometer. it is literally the same concept, except we turn in increments of 2, and we will never use the TMK in the KBA progression possibilities. Another rule, never use the TMK bidding in the KBA as progression possibilities. Never. If you do that, you're going to create keys that work places where they should not. Since we are working in TPP and have not yet discussed rotating constant or limited position progression, I mention this again. It's that important. Okay, right there. It is that important. 4, you will note we will move in increments of 2 every time. If the TMK cut has a 9, as does our TMK in the 6th chamber, you will always, not always, as that would be an advanced topic called going in between, which we won't go into, use every other number but not the 9. Therefore, you will use 1, 3, 5, and 7 if we're using chamber 6. Just to go back, going in between is an advanced topic where if you needed to expand an exhausted keying system, there is a technique where if you do it in 2 places, you can create a new KBA and use a 2 here and say a 5 here. And as long as you do it in 2 places, actually you're going to want to do 1 lower and 1 higher is what it is. So you would get rid of the 4 and make that a 5, and then you'll get rid of the 3 and make it a 2, is what you could do. That would give you a number of additional keys. It's done you do it in 2 chambers so that you've got positive and negative locking that's happening. Pins above and pins below at the same time. You need to ensure that. Advanced topic, that's what it means, and that's when you're trying to expand an exhausted master key system. You've used up all your theoretical keys, and as a result of that, you've pulled out as many as you can, and you need more. And that's a technique that you'd learn in an ALOA class. So how do we use this KBA tool? Let's start with this. What is your first bidding? If you guessed, why would you? 692741, you are right. Let's focus on deriving our first 4 change keys. Take a look at this stripped down KBA. So 692741, you're just progressing the first row of all the chambers, and that's going to be your first change key. So we've only progressed the 6th chamber. We've added our sequence of progression and our TMK. This allows us to focus only on the A SOP column. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to show you how you come up with key numbers. If 692741 is the first change key, what are the first 4 change keys? 692741, 692743, 45, 47. Those are your first 4 change keys. Not sure where we came from? Well, you've seen this before, and that's where they came from. All we did was use up our first 4 progression possibilities with the 4 in the 5th column. If you need a 5th change key, rotate the B column now, and you'll use a 6. 6 would be the next progression. 4, 6, 4, 6 in the 5th chamber. It's going to look like that. You've seen this before, I think. And you can see your next 4 biddings. They're the biddings 5 through 8. They're the same as biddings 1 through 4, but the 5th column goes from a 4 to a 6. They're the same in every other respect, but they're different absolutely where they won't work each other's lock. This process repeats until you have methodically cycled through every progression possibility in every chamber. The key term here is methodically. If you did so, methodically progress through all possibilities, you will have 4,096 biddings. These are the theoretical biddings, as you could not use all 4,096 possibilities, as many of them would violate max or would be awful keys, as I say here, An awful key would be 212101. Not a lot of variation between those cuts. It could turn out to be very easy to pick that key. I could come up with other key numbers that would also be awful that, could end up operating the cylinder when they weren't supposed to. Or I should say they could end up operating the cylinder with the key partially pulled out. An example of my awful key is is 212101, which happens to be, if I were to progress all 4096, it's AA3372. And knowing that 212101 is AA3372 from our original KBA is what Lloyd would call master key bar tricks. I hope I'm right on that. I didn't use software, I did it in my head. If I'm wrong, I apologize. Whatever AA3372 is, if you know that, it's a master key bar trick. Whoops. Here again is our earlier graphic, which shows what the first 64 changes would look like and how we would produce them from the KBA. You can study this. This is just there to kind of show you the relationship. It's pretty easy. The first one is just the top three up here. The last one will be the bottom three down here, and that's 64 changes. Understanding the KBA allows us to begin to discuss and understand the standard progression format. We spoke earlier about how factors of 4 are important to study. The standard progression format, SPF is what it's called, 2 relies on factors of 4, very heavily in fact. So what is the SPF? The SPF is coming up next, but I think what I'll do is let's just draw a key bidding array by hand so you can see it actually done by hand one time, and then we're going to move on to the standard progression format. Okay, let's build a KBA. So, just to show you how easy it is. Oh boy. However you're going to do it, Excel, whatever the case is, paper, you're going to buy HPC Master King. You won't be drawing it then. Although, and I've had people call and say, hey, should I buy software for doing this? And I've always said to people, I really don't think so. Or I've said in the past, if you're going to, it helps to know how to do it manually so you can see what the software is doing. 47052 FEDCBA 1357468079135468956802. Double check your work. You don't want to start pulling biddings out to find out that, yeah, you have a copy and paste error. So if we're going to look at this, we're going to let's drive some biddings here. So our first change key is going to be 692741, 434547, 61 63 65 67, 81 83 85 87, 01 03 05 07. They're all 6927. I just rattled off the first 16 change keys. Now, if you want to put your A over here, it would be 692741. 694741, 696741, 698741, 69. Oh, that's all. So what's your B column going to be? Let's say you made this the B column. So it'd be 694. No, sorry. It's going to be 692941, 694941, 696941 if this is A and this is B. And you can see how now I can't do it so fast anymore. That was the point of that. 698941. Okay, so let's get change keys 9 through 12. It's going to be 692141, 694141, 696141. So anyway, the point of the matter is now I slow down. I'm not so 41, 43, 45, 47, 61, 63, 65, 67. You know what I mean? You're not so quick anymore. But it would definitely be better to move these guys over to the center of the key, because this is where the least jiggling is going to happen. As that goes up and that goes down, that area right there, that's where the least jiggle will come from. When that gets, you take that key and you work it like that in the cylinder. So that's why you might want to do that. And I'm sure software will allow you to specify your sequence of progression. I don't recall. I am reasonably confident that Master Keying by HPC will allow that. I would think that would be a very basic requirement to tweak the sequence of progression. Anyway, that's how you would quickly draw a KBA. Now, if I just continued through it, I would go through, 64 pages of 64 keys each, and that's going to be 4,096 cuts. All of these, if you used every possible combination of these 6 columns and these 4 rows, it'll be 4,096. Okay, we're going to be wrapping this up now. Let's do so. Now, as you can see, hopefully, that the key bidding array is an indispensable tool that will allow you to create biddings. I had a locksmith somewhere in Florida, maybe he was in Daytona Beach, and he needed a master key list. He needed me to provide him. He's a locksmith. The term locksmith is a very broad title to give someone. Because there are so many different areas of concentration and areas within each of developed skills. No two locksmiths are the same. One person might be really great theoretically, but doesn't really pin any cylinders. One person might just do all the keying and doesn't think a lot about how the numbers are created. Some people can do automotive, others can't. Some people love it, others hate it. So this gentleman being a locksmith, but he had an unusual circumstance where he needed two or three masters, and he wanted like a dozen change keys under each, and hired me to do it only because he wanted to be sure that he wasn't going to have keys operating each other, and he had not yet learned that relationship. And when you use the construct of the tools of a locksmith, the mental tools, the KBA, the standard progression format, dividing the key, expansion specification, methods of progression, you are safeguarding yourself from making unintentional mistakes that you may not realize for 5 years. You might learn something in the future and you think back and say, gosh, I did that all wrong. That happens all the time. So when you learn these when you learn these, reasonably advanced skills, you will become pretty watertight pretty soon. And it also helps if you do it a lot. If you occasionally key locks, you might just have someone else do it. If you very occasionally key locks, you'll definitely want to have someone else do it. But if you dabble into it or try to develop it as a source of revenue, yeah, you're going to need to learn this stuff, in my opinion. Let's move on to standard progression format now.